Hello and welcome back to the Angerati studio here at European Utility Week. I'm joined now by Donald Pollock, who's the Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Ambient. Donald, firstly, welcome to the studio. Thank you for making the time. I'm sure you're relieved that you can sit down and take some pressure off your feet after nearly 2.5 days.
Yeah.
Donald, we were talking a little bit off air, and the conversation turned towards some of the challenges that the industry had, and you said, well, one of the key challenges is a transmission challenge of data. Can you just explain a little bit more what you mean by that and how we should solve it? I suppose that's two questions in one.
Sure. Traditionally, utilities have tended to have silos of concentration of operational focus, and whether it be metering or SCADA or sensing and monitoring, those have been operating in isolation of each other. And as we've moving towards a smart grid, there's a requirement to effectively pool the information that you have from each of those different separate operational areas within a utility, and ensure that they're working together to make more than the sum of the parts. And obviously data is a key component of the information that the utility needs to run their grid more efficiently, to ensure the quality of service to their customers. And if they operate in isolated silos, they're not going to make the most of either the technologies that are out there, or they're going to increase greater costs than they need necessarily do.
And I suppose they also won't be able to get the whole picture of the entire ecosystem, because I would imagine you can't, you're always then looking back. This is just from a pure data management. If everything is in a silo, you then need to pull down the silos, do the analysis, spit out the thing. By the time you've done all of that, you may be looking at something that's a month old, a picture that's a month old.
Potentially, yes. And when you talk about the timing of the data, with the advent of the new technologies that are available, and also the pressures that are now exerted on the grid through either the integration of renewables, the increase in demand that's coming, that is at present actually, on the grid, it's causing some stress in those distribution networks. And therefore, to be able to react effectively to the pressures that exist, you have to have real-time data. It's really important. Yeah. And in some senses, if you have real-time data that facilitates action that avoids costs, avoids reliability issues, avoids damaging assets within the grid, then you're going to have a much happier customer, and also a utility executive that has got the service that they require and the uptime.
Yeah, and you'll be saving, because you aren't waiting for something to blow up before you fix it. You can kind of sense it beforehand, you know. It's And as you're the first interviewee who's bought a prop, I got to ask the question: what is that?
Well, you know, this is an Ambient mini node, and Ambient's a communications and applications platform provider, a North American company that's based out of Boston. We've just opened actually a European subsidiary office, and this last month to coincide with the Utility Week show. And it's one of the new products that we're launching. We have 100,000 of our smart grid nodes that are deployed within North America at this moment in time for one of the largest publicly owned utilities there. Basically, the nodes facilitate multiple applications. So it may be distributed automation, smart metering, electric vehicles, demand response. All those applications have a two-way digital communications requirement.
So does this then allow someone to either very accurately know or make a best guess as to what the end use is. So this is being used to charge an electric vehicle. This has been used for this, because that's one of the things that came out of some earlier interviews, and goes back to your point about collecting this data in real time. What are people then doing with this data, and is there an issue around tool sets that will actually allow real-time response as a result of data events?
Sure. Definitely. It doesn't necessarily matter what the application is, whether it's electric vehicles or distribution market. That doesn't necessarily matter. It is to be able to provide an action out of it. And with all the different applications that are happening within the distribution grid that are having that stress effect, you need to have the right data coming back. People have talked about the data tsunami, where everything's coming back to the utility, and then you're tying up both personnel or computing power or storage facilities to hold that data or look at critical events as they go on, or reacting after the event. If you have distributed intelligence within the grid infrastructure, whereby you have smart devices like the Ambient node that is able to continuously monitor what's actually happening, either it might be a power quality issue, for sake of example, to monitor what's happening, and the user, the utility, the distribution control executives, they can then, engineers, they can then set the parameters, the thresholds that they want to be alerted if there is a problem.
Is there not an opportunity here where, if I take a benchmark of the networking world, i.e. computer networking,
sure.
internet, there are a lot of smart devices within that environment that create the sort of self-healing network. Is that the same thing that's happening in the smart grid, whereby the machines themselves can take action up to a certain level and solve the problems themselves?
Yes, and that's something that's been talked about quite a lot, is that there's a self-healing grid. But to be able to do that, you have to have the intelligence at the points of where the healing needs to be,
where the failure is taking
where the failure is
place,
taking place.
Yeah.
And for there to be action, you need to have the data, and you need to have a consequent reaction to that data. And an intelligent device that can carry that out is obviously going to be beneficial. So it's automating the actions based upon preset parameters, based upon software that's running on the intelligent end devices, and ensuring also that the right information is getting back, or if there's a catastrophic failure. But if there's
in all of this, I mean, it sounds like it makes immense sense. But what's the biggest hurdle to overcome in order to make all of, you mentioned silos earlier on, to make them all communicate? Because it seems to me it's, and this may be a very simplistic statement, it sounds such an obvious thing to do. There must be something that's stopping it.
I think there's actually a clear focus from the utilities perspective they have recognized that they need to change the ways that they have perhaps previously operated. It differs, I'm sure, from utility to utility. But if they combine the different aspects of their operation, they're going to get a much better solution from the sum of the parts.
Makes sense, and it sounds logical.
Not for me to preach to them in terms of how to manage the business.
Absolutely. Are you going to ask you a slightly different question now?
Sure.
Much more of a personal question. You're someone who's been in the industry, and I just wanted to ask you: is there any one thing, or are there things you've heard over the last sort of 2.5 days at this event that you would particularly pull out for someone who's maybe watching this video in terms of something that you've seen interesting in terms of a shift of thinking, or I'm not going to say products because you'll mention Ambient, and you've done that.
Okay, sorry. Particular emphasis in terms of the thinking that I've heard over the last 2 days. Well,
you're allowed to say it's the same thing. It's just moved on a bit.
It's more a question of what's the shift in thinking? I think the challenges remain the same. It's the level of knowledge is increasing from understanding of both the vendors that are operating in the space and also the end customers. There is a vast array of choice in the marketplace that exists at this moment in time, and people have to be given the tools to navigate through that choice, to know whether one solution is better than another, or how that solution interrelates with that one, and does it work together? Because we're talking about substantial investments here in the grid infrastructure, whether it be communications or otherwise. And we're talking about a lifetime period of 10 plus years that typically utilities have looked at. And making those levels of choice, decision about new technologies, there needs to be reassurance and understanding to be able to do that.
You're echoing what another interview said earlier on in the series, and it is interesting to hear that, because you're right. You know, maybe akin to being a consumer and trying to buy a phone these days. You know, unless you're just an iPhone fanatic. You know, in which case there's only one choice. But you know, navigating that can be a nightmare. Donald, it's been a pleasure having you here. That's all we've got time for. And I want to thank you as well for watching. And there are many more videos from this event and other events on engerati.com. And we hope you enjoyed this production, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.